Hello, everybody. It's Ruby from WFA, and today we have Renee Rhodes from R+Dogs. If you haven't yet, please give her page a follow and a like, either on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok, or any of the things. She has some phenomenal infographics and information on her pages and her websites. And she's also a speaker for our Trainers for Rescues presentation, July 10th to 17th. Her presentation will be on July 16th at 3:15 and UK time, and then she'll come on around 4 o'clock UK time for some questions and answers. Let's begin. Renee, can you introduce yourself for a little bit?
Sure. My name is Renee Rhodes, and I am officially an applied animal behaviorist. Although I generally use the term dog behaviorist because I'm very directed towards dogs specifically, more along canines than any other species. I also have some other certifications, qualifications, such as Fear-Free Certified, Family Dog Mediator, and I primarily work with clients who have dogs that have essentially big feelings about the world. So emotional dysregulation, dogs that struggle both in their home environments as well as out in the world. Also just recently starting to kind of normalize hyperactivity. So dogs that are the type of dogs that I suppose people would say don't calm down, or high drive types of dogs. So we're finding a lot more of our focus to be on those as well. All of that is done virtually. So I've been virtual now about just over 3 years and work exclusively virtually.
That's amazing. The fact that you can do it all virtually is fantastic, because I think that's one thing that we've learned, especially since COVID, is that there's so much power in remote work, especially when you do have a dog who is hyperactive or aggressive or fearful. I mean, like, let's break down aggressive, because I don't want to use aggressive in a negative connotation. It's fearful or stressed or any of these medical conditions that are unaddressed, or pain that's unaddressed. The dog is aggressive due to these conditions, not just aggressive. So I know when I've worked with hyperactive dogs that the training can actually make them more active. And I think that's a really big thing that you're working remotely.
Yeah. I mean, aggressive is a term that I tell my clients I don't even like using it.
Yeah.
So whenever we talk about the ladder of aggression, I actually use the ladder of communication. And that I prefer much more, because to me, aggression is a symptom rather than label for the dog. But yeah, absolutely. I don't have to worry anymore when I go into the home of a dog who doesn't want me to be there, or who can't calm down because I'm there. And it's very much human focused, which has improved my human skills exponentially. Because I was very much a person who said, I love dogs, and I do it for the dogs. Where now, working, through virtual, I'm working with the human, and I have not a lot of contact with the dogs except through video. And that's just, I just love people who love their dogs. It's just such a great feeling of working with them and helping them to have that relationship that they want.
And I think this is something people forget, is that when we're helping a dog, many animal professionals say, like, we love the animals, but when you're a behaviorist, and especially love that you are a certified behaviorist and you're certified qualified, because that's a big thing, and that's really important to me, is that anybody who is part of Trainers for Rescues has to be qualified. Because if you're doing remote work, or if you're doing in-person work, you have to be able to assess that dog's emotional well-being and welfare, and where they're at, like I said, the big feelings, and help them. Whereas if you don't have the qualifications, you could actually exacerbate these big feelings. And so I think for me, it's really important that you're helping the human, because again, so many of us get into this, we love the animals, but we have to love the human too.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful process. I mean, like I said, I was very much for the dogs, and through working virtual, it's just been such an evolution for me personally to be like, I get so excited working with people when they come to me for like a behavior assessment, and I hear their story, and I hear, all the information about the dog, and my head is buzzing with all of these different ideas. And, it's just and really grow to, like, from day one, I'm just in it with my clients. So I really grow to create and kind of nurture the relationships that I have with them. And I'm always joking because when I say, hey, we're going to start with our, package or whatever, can you send me a picture of your dog? Because I hardly get to see the dogs anymore. So it's it's nice to be able to improve those relationships, but sometimes you do miss the dogs.
It, I agree. Like, I love remote work, but when you get to be like, get that connection as a behaviorist with an animal, there's nothing that can, but also when you do work with hyperactive animals, when you walk through that door, as soon as you walk through that door, you are a trigger. And if you're a
Mhm.
trigger, they're going to mouth, they're going to jump on you. And because they have such big feelings, they find it really hard to self-regulate.
Yeah. And I find the opposite, and you might find that you're working in person. That happened a lot for me, where the dog was very much attuned to what I was doing, responding very well to me. And it's actually a part of why I went virtual, is because I was feeling that clients sometimes felt disappointed that the dog was responding really well to me and that
Yeah.
they weren't able to replicate that. So working virtually now puts it all onto the human, for me to be able to coach the human part, to be able to say, like, you can do this, you can, you can do it. And now they don't have that feeling of, I'm a failure because my dog doesn't listen to me, versus my dogs listen to me. And even so, I have clients that, years back, and they hear me talking on, conferences or doing, a video reel, and they're like, oh, they're even still responding to my name or something that I do. And it's, it's nice for the guardian to have that relationship with their dog. I mean, you can walk into a house and you can kind of work with the dog for a couple of minutes, and they're so responsive because the history is, that's the treat lady, or that's the lady who, makes
Yeah.
everything really clear and easy for me. Versus the client having that. And the client for me is both the dog and the human, but the client having that is, they're having that level of communication that they just weren't having before. And it's their wins, instead of being, look what I can get your dog to do. Your dog can do this. You both can do it together.
And I think that's really important because, like I said, like I've had some clients where you walk in and you're like, oh, I can do this. Let me show you. Because I always want to show them first, and then they have to do it after. And like you said, because we are qualified professionals, it's clear communication to the dog. The dog knows what we want. We have reinforcement that can count, whereas we've, invested through treats and praise and communication, what we want the dog to be doing. And then they try doing it and they're like, the dog can't do it. And then
Yeah.
they get really frustrated themselves because you're like, what? The dog just did it for you. Why can't the dog do it for me? And so that's something that's really important to me, is that I walk through people through it, but then maybe like the first like five trials, and then they have to do it
Yeah.
because I'm not going to have somebody who's frustrated, because it's a really big thing. But what are you going to be presenting on for Trainers for Rescues? It's a very exciting topic. I'm very thrilled about it.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about the first few weeks that you get a rescue dog in, or adopted dog in generally. And I think, like I was saying to you just previously, it's something that I encounter a lot. And we were kind of joking that you get the dog comes to you, and immediately people are so excited for the dog to be there, and they want to do all these things, and they have all these aspirations and goals and ideas. And we have to say, hey, let's just pump the brakes a little bit. So hopefully through my talk, it'll give people some idea of what that experience might be like for their dog, and why it is a good thing to just wait a little bit before you start wanting to doing, all the things with your dog.
I think that's really important because, like we were discussing earlier, I just had somebody all the time, not just yesterday, but all the time. I had people email me and saying, "I just got a dog. I just brought a dog home from a rescue, adopted, however. Okay, let's start training." And I'm like, we can't do that because the first 3 weeks we tend to forget, like the first, well, the rule of the template is like the rule of 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, but I kind of like expand that to however the dog feels. But we forget when we move a home, or when you're staying in a hotel, let's say you're going on a vacation because you are just back from your vacation, which I really appreciate, you don't feel the same because your body it doesn't have the same routines that you always have. So whether you're in a hotel or you're just moved a house, you don't know, you're very disorientated and confused because you're in a new home.
Yeah, you don't know the layout. You don't know where, the cutlery is. You don't know where they keep, the broom. Like, yeah, I mean, my vacation was, and this is another, interesting factor of talking about environment and how much that predicts behavior. And I mean, I've met rescue dogs where they've been there 5 minutes and it seems like they've been there all their life, but
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the kind of common occurrence for most dogs. But
Yeah.
you're right, it's very much an adjustment period. And every time we move, not even just going on vacation, but even just, like you mentioned, moving, that is always, even in the best of times, moving is so incredibly stressful. And we know what's going on.
Yeah.
Dogs that are, kind of picked up, maybe briefly put into maybe a shelter situation or some kind of foster situation, and then maybe put in a truck or another kind of, vehicle, and then plopped into this very welcoming, very best intentions, and laid out home. But you're just, what the heck? That was such a whirlwind of time. Anybody, if they put themselves in that position, would think, wow. But we don't necessarily equate that to our dogs. We're just, very excited. But at the same time, we just think, wow, okay, let's get going. And yeah, our dogs need a little bit of time, just like us. Whenever we move, it's kind of like you're not in your house immediately with everything set out again. You slowly have to start to unpack, slowly understand the layout, get your bearings, and then it feels like home eventually.
Well, that's what I was just thinking is one of my friends moved from China. I used to live in China, and she moved with her partner to Poland because of jobs and whatnot. And she was a very adaptive dog, very confident dog who's used to traveling and going places. And the dog moved from Shanghai, which is a mega city, over to France for a few days for rest. Of course, they're in a crate underneath the airplane. And from there, now they took a car ride over to her new place. And I was just thinking, I look at the videos, I'm like, that dog is adjusting. This is a rare breed, by the way. This is the magic dog. Most dogs would be like hiding and not moving or very fearful, and so I kind of look at this as, yes, like some dogs are able to bounce back really easily, or they kind of go, oh wow, like there's so many new things here. But the majority of dogs that we experience don't have that capacity, or the emotional capacity, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were away for a few days, as you just said, and my older dog doesn't really like to travel in the car. And so he needs some sedation to help him with that. And the first few days, he was kind of getting, his bearings a little bit. And then the third day, it was like, boom, he was back. And I knew that the potential for him to have a little bit of that kind of transition period, albeit quite, short, but I knew it was going to happen. So when he was acting a little differently, and of course I know him, so I know his behavior, but when he was acting a little differently, I was like, he just needs a little bit of time. And, with some rest, again, on that third day, it was like clockwork. He was just like, woke up and it was his happy, waggy tail self. And then it was like, okay, you're back now. It's all right. But the first 2 days were a little bit like, let's just give you some room, give you some time and give you space to be able to relax and do what you want to do within reason, so that he could acclimatize to that.
And I think there was a meme, Mimi. Oh, is it Mimi or Mimi? I always get this wrong. Anyways, on
I always say
Instagram,
meme.
it's always horrible. I'm like in my brain, like this is Mimi. It's meme. Sorry. When I was Instagram doom scrolling, I saw that picture of people saying how when they go on vacation, they're up as early as possible to do as many things as possible, and then after their vacation, they're tired. And I was just thinking, if
Yeah.
we're bringing our dogs on vacation, or if we're bringing a dog home from our shelter, that's how the dog is feeling. Is that, like I said, they're in a new place, they're in a new environment. They're even more tired if you're trying to do a million different things. And so if they're acting out because they're exhausted. And it's so exciting for us to have a new animal in our household, but we have to remember that first 2-3 days, or even the first few weeks, it needs to be a rest period.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, it's the same. I often will use that analogy and say, have you ever gone on vacation and said, God, I need a vacation from my vacation,
Yeah.
because you just overdid it and you do need that time to recuperate. I mean, I'm American, I live in the UK, but whenever I come home and I've had that kind of layover, that jet lag, previously, I would go to work anyway and then regret going to work for a couple days. But
Yeah.
now I'm older and wiser, so I understand that if I do have that jet lag, I need to give myself a few days overlap.
I've
'Cause
done
you
that
just
as well
feel out
too.
of sorts. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I can do everything. And then you're like, oh, I
Why
should
did I
not.
do this to myself?
Exactly. And so I was just thinking about that, how my days off, I'm out hiking, and then I need like 3 days of work when I'm trying to like focus again because I'm just on a 5 hour hike, and I'm like my brain and body is like, what were you thinking? Versus having a day to rest. And so when we have a new dog and we bring that dog home again, we have to think about their journey and think about what they've gone through potentially if we don't know, and then also how we can do things in their home. So you're going to talk about in your presentation the tips and tricks they can do so the dog will be able to decompress and they'll be able to help with the adjustment period.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super, super important. And I think, one of the challenges that I'm going to present is, to do nothing and to try to do nothing, which
That's
is
like
a simple challenge, it sounds like, but
it's
it's a
not
very hard
simple.
challenge for people. Yeah,
And
it's very hard. I mean, yeah, even just with dogs, maybe who might be reactive to their surroundings, the amount of times that I've had to advise clients, to maybe stop doing things like a walk, for instance, to stop doing a walk. And I understand, I'm not, nagging on them whatsoever, because I understand that there is this, ethereal pressure for us to feel like if we're not walking our dogs, then we're not doing proper
yeah,
care for them.
yeah.
So to say to them, you have to stop. And every time you think of doing that, I want you to use that energy to do something else that's proactive for your dog. So maybe do some enrichment or play with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very hard to get out of these kind of weirdly hardwired behaviors that we have.
Well, we are social beings, but
Yeah.
and I find like one thing Caroline is actually presenting on mindfulness, because that's a big thing, is like you said, being mindful to rest, being mindful to sleep, let your dog sleep. And I think that's really important, is that we are programmed, like you said, to kind of do, but we aren't programmed to slow down. And like you're saying, when you're going to go back home, you see everybody, you're jet lagged, like you see all your family, you see all your friends. That's a lot of peopling. And so one thing that people do when they have a new dog is like, let's bring the whole family over. Let's have a barbecue. Let's bring the dog to the barbecue. Let's take the dog out for a doggy park, which I've never
Yeah,
recommended
he's
people
a
doing.
celebrity.
Yeah, he's a brand new thing. We should show him off to the world. And think how tired we are after peopling. How tired is that dog? And then dogs, because they can't communicate, they communicate through expressing different behaviors. Can you give me some examples of these behaviors dogs might express if they've been over peopled? Over peopled, is that a word? It should be a word.
I think it is a word. Yeah, I mean, withdrawn, not necessarily wanting to interact. So you're not going to see a dog that's super happy and wanting to greet you. Maybe a dog that's moving away, a dog that might be, a little quote unquote hand shy. You might see some of those more subtle behaviors. So maybe some yawns, some little lip licks, tongue flicks, kind of side turns, again, not wanting to be touched or be interacted with. Yeah, I mean, those might be something that you see the dog not wanting to interact whatsoever. I think there's also a huge misconception about dogs wanting to gain information
Yeah.
through olfactory, wanting to sniff, wanting to kind of, investigate someone, versus a dog looking for interaction. So that one also gets misunderstood a lot, especially if you're meeting a new person. The dog wants to investigate, they might move forward, and the person takes that as an invitation to touch them, because we are primates. So we want a hands on things. And then the dog goes, no, that's not exactly what I wanted to happen. And you might get a little bit of a, dip over, you might get a little bit of a growl, you might get a little bit of a freeze. And if the dog is pushed, then you also might get a little bit of that, maybe a little bit of a snap. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there can be, and again, that if for someone who just got that dog, it might be a bit embarrassing because you're like, whoa, oh, I didn't know he was like this, a rescue. They didn't tell me that he bites people. So there's a lot of miscommunication that happens sometimes with those. But yes, over peopling is definitely for all of us, I think.
It
Um,
needs to be, it definitely needs to be a word, because when I over people, I'm like, I'm in bed. I cannot move for like a few hours. So I'm so
Yeah.
like drained. I'm an introvert with extroverted qualities. And we don't always think that maybe the dogs could also be an introvert with extroverted qualities, because we think all dogs have to be these joyful, bubbly, bringers of fluff. Bringers of fluff should also be a word. Because they should always be a happy doggy like Lassie. And we tend to forget that that's not, dogs are individuals, and when they have an individual, we don't, and they have past experiences, what they've gone through are going to go with how they interact with you. And I think one thing, could you maybe go into more detail about what does it mean to let a dog interact with you but not be touched? Can you go into more detail that people who maybe don't know what that means?
Yeah, I think letting the dog be able to get a scent of a person. I mean, you don't have to stick your hand out into the dog's face. I often say, when people do that, I'm like, he already smelt you. He smelt you like, a mile away.
Yeah, yeah.
Trying to let the dog gain information without physically touching them. So, it's often best to kind of pretend like the dog isn't there, pretend like the dog is, just not in the room whatsoever. Doesn't mean that you have to completely neglect the dog, but if the dog is feeling apprehensive and getting that information, being able to get a little bit closer to you, sniff you, that's going to be the best thing for them to be able to kind of figure you out a little bit. And if you don't approach, if you don't initiate contact with them, they're more likely to come back and want to gain more information and feel much safer in your presence.
And I
There's
think that,
also,
go ahead.
oh, sorry.
No, please
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say, if you do want your dog to, say you have a friend who's like a person who frequently comes over, you can have them toss treats behind the dog. Let
Yeah.
the dog retreat away in order for the dog to come back. Try not to give food directly from the hand because that can be coercive to the dog, but allowing the dog the ability to retreat and then come back and see if they want to interact.
So like treat to retreat would be something that would be something great for people to use. So that way the dog doesn't gain food from the hand. Because I think this is one thing, people really love to be handsy with dogs, because again, we're, like I said, we're primates, we're social beings. We want to hug, we want to touch, we want to explore the world with our hands. Sometimes whereas dogs explore the world with their mouths. So we have to remember, their noses and their mouths are how they explore the world versus us doing this. And so if you have a dog who's maybe fearful of certain things, like I had a dog I was working with a few weeks ago who loved the family, but was very scared of the men. So any sort of man who came over was just like, I'm going to be cautious and cowering in the corner because the dog was triggered by just the sight of a man. And the smell of a man as well, because the smell of a man is probably very different than the smell of us. Well,
Yeah, absolutely.
especially some men. I've smelled some other people.
Yeah, and we see this a lot with foreign rescues where the men do most of the kind of rounding up of dogs, handling of dogs, things like that. And the women tend to be, we are generalizing here, but we do tend to be the ones that are kind of caring for the dogs, putting them into fosters and saving them essentially. And so you do see a lot of that. I mean, usually when I get a foreign rescue and they have difficulty with men, it's kind of like, let's tick that one off. Yeah, we're expecting that one a little bit.
Mhm.
But also I think men move differently, again, generalizing, but they move differently. They have facial hair, they like to wear hats and, sometimes they're going to frequent in high vis like gear. So there is a little bit of a difference that does come with men. But I think equally I've met I've met dogs where they don't like women. And you're like, oh, maybe you haven't been exposed. And it's not always a negative. I think people think it's always a negative, and it doesn't have to be. There could have been no exposure at all. So maybe, raised in a family with lots of men or just a single man around. It's not always a negative. The dog hasn't always been abused or neglected. It may just be that they haven't had that experience before.
And I think that's a really good point, because the majority of animal professionals in the shelter or training, say shelter, because I know shelter stats, I don't know about training stats. Animal professionals in the shelter world are mostly women. So for dogs, when they are going through these traumatic events, they're mostly handled by women. And so, that's not a sexist thing, it's just the way that the world is at this moment. So for a dog who's gone through that journey of being a rescue dog, to see, let's say, a man, or to see things that they've not seen before, like a hat, like you said, like when you have a dog who you're bringing home for your presentation, the first few weeks of maybe don't wear a hat, don't, keep your body language really calm as well too. So I think that's something that we always tend to forget, is we're like, oh my god, puppy, oh, my hand just disappeared there. So but we're so touchy-feely that we forget that dog has gone through so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it is a lot. Like you said, we're a species that we like to hug, we like to connect physically, and dogs do not. This is not something that most dogs enjoy. I mean, they can learn to enjoy it or learn to tolerate it, but it's not a physical feature for them. They're not craving necessarily. Even dogs who want closeness, you may find that your dog wants to maybe be touching you, but your dog is not seeking, your dog is not seeking that innate closeness that we have, or we want to have with, a friend, a family, partner, things like that.
And I was just thinking about my own little kitty cats. Spark, my very large 15 fat, not fluffy cat, fluffy, not fat cat. He loves to be held. So that's his thing. When he gets, like, we had a big thunderstorm last night, he just wanted me to hold him and comfort him. And that was his thing. For like 5 minutes, I held him in my arms, and he was like, oh my God, the world is dying. We had hail. And so even though we had hail and I had closed all the windows and everything like that and put the music on, he was like, oh my God. Whereas Marmalade is 7 pounds and semi-feral. And she's now become more domesticated. She's because she's been in my home for 10 years. But she loves to sit next to me. She does not like to be cuddled, unless she chooses to make the cuddling situation, which could be like a hand. She can put her paws in her hand or whatnot. But for her, she will sit on me if I'm asleep or if she wants food. Asleep might also be she wants food as well too. But for her, it's not a cuddle in that way like Spark. It's I want to be close to you, but in a way that I feel safe.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the same as my boys. The cat just wants to constantly, I mean, he will literally climb on you and hang on. He just, no inhibitions whatsoever. But the boys definitely, Nero, if something concerns him, he will come to me for comfort.
Yeah.
I practically have to beg him for me to be able to have, him come sit on the couch with me. Whereas like in the shepherd wants nothing more than to be touched and then touched and then I mean, he will initiate and keep initiating. And I think it's important, like you said, that he initiated that contact with you. I tell clients all the time, I will do consent tests with my own dogs. And Nero, who is a little bit more sensitive about touch, that has improved our behavior exponentially our relationship exponentially, because the behavior for him, even though he trusts me, even though, I am his safety zone, it's still that I might be pushing that just a little bit too much for him. So allowing him to have that out has given him the ability to come back. I mean, we do something called consent brushing, where again, brushing, because he is quite a thin-coated dog. He's a, I actually have a Tangle teaser from Human. And very sensitive. So he's a Whippet cross border collie and has very much of a whippety body.
Got it.
But for him, we just do consent brushing. And before I would brush him, you know what it's like. And then I just started consent brushing. So I would say, do you want brushes? And he would either stand there, wag his tail, look at me, or he might move. Like what he does now is I say, do you want brushes? and then he will move his body where he wants me to brush.
Yeah.
And so if he stands there, or if he does any sort of indication that he wants it to continue, then I will continue. But I will then again bring it back and say, do you want brushes? And then it gives him the ability to say yes or no. And so doing that, I do that with both the dogs. And
Yeah.
doing that, then he will, I mean, one morning I brushed him for about 30 minutes. He
Yeah.
just wanted, so, just keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, which is wonderful. And I practice that with my clients, especially clients that have issues with brushing their dog. Are you giving the dog an out? Are you giving them the ability to say no and respecting the fact that they're saying no? Because it's an extension of touching.
It is. And I think I was just thinking about that because I do the same thing with Spark, where, he loves the brush is his like favorite thing, but I'll brush him a few times and then take my hands off and say, okay, what do you want to do? And he will walk away, saunter around, strut because he's a cat, put his tail up and be like, all right, I'm coming back for more. Here's my butt. So I kind of think about that as that's one thing that people can easily do as a consent test, which is pet, pause, and see, does your dog want to have more? And if they want to have more, they come into your space. If they don't want to have more, they don't come into your space. And that's a simple thing we can do. It's been about 30 minutes and I don't want to, you're still on vacation, so I really appreciate that. Is there anything else you want to mention about your presentation on the 16th that we've not covered?
No, I think hopefully, like I said, it's going to be insightful for people. I want to be able to give them, maybe a good look at what just, kind of, I like to tweak a little bit. I like to kind of give a little bit more insight and hopefully help people to understand what might be going on with their dogs. As you know, probably from following me on social media, it's not the quintessential, you're going to get this information. I really want people to kind of think a little bit deeper. And sometimes it is good to put yourself in the position of your dog. Anthropomorphism has, very, very high benefits. There are some things about it which, aren't beneficial for our dogs, but a lot of it can be. So, I hope that gives them a little bit of a pause when you are thinking about adding a new dog. What is that going to be like? And how am I going to set that dog up so that they are, a loving part of the family, but also that their boundaries are respected?
Fantastic. Marlena says that she's very excited for this. So
tell her I'm wearing my do no harm. I'm wearing Harold.
Oh,
So
fantastic. You're wearing the do no harm outfit.
I am. Yeah. Love Harold. Love Marlene. They're great.
I need to get more gear, but I worry because my cat Spark, he was tossed in the dumpster before he was properly weaned, so he sucks on my clothes a bit. So I have to, if I have anything nice, I have to hide it from him because we tend to forget that maybe like hanging clothes up would be a helpful thing. But if I forget to hang anything up, he's like, game on. So I have to be mindful of the clothes I get, that they're not too, like this one's very thin and I already have a hole in it because of
oh my goodness, you're not kidding. Yeah.
That's been years of this, and he's like, I found my spot.
Okay. Yeah.
But still, it's like I have to be very mindful that the clothes I have are in specific locations, or else he's like, excellent. And if I have a laundry basket, Marmalade's like, this is my laundry basket. So I have to be animals. So
Lycan's like that with Scott's socks.
Exactly.
I keep telling him, how's he getting your socks? But he loves this. He doesn't do anything to them. He just likes to just let us know I have them. Yeah,
exactly. And also for people who have animals who grab their socks or play with their clothes, this is okay to let your animal to do this. Spark needs to have an outlet for his stress whenever he's stressed, or he needs to have feel secure or safe. He needs to nurse, like, because again he was weaned, he's tossed in the dumpster, so he's not properly weaned properly. So if your dog does suckle on your clothes, do talk to your veterinarian about this. I've talked to my veterinarian and they're like, oh yeah, this is due to the situation. But if your dog does hold your sock around, this is fine. If they need to have something to chew up, give them an alternative if you want to, because we have to make sure that people realize that.
To wear.
Exactly. Or put your clothes in a place the dog can access it or the cat can access it, which in my case, Marmalade actually digs through my laundry basket and throws things on the ground. So
I think it's a little bit more challenging with cats. For the dogs, we just close the door.
Yeah. I've had dogs open doors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it depends on the dog. Before I forget, please do check out R+Dogs on Instagram and Facebook, TikTok as well, I believe.
No, I've abandoned TikTok.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's too much. Yeah.
You're also on LinkedIn. There you go. I know you're on LinkedIn, and I think you're on YouTube as well. So if not, go check out her website. I love her posts. They're phenomenal. They're so educational.
Thank you.
There are some of my favorite
Instagram
posts.
is my main. Yeah, that's my baby. So you can always find me there.
And she has 58.8K followers. So I think she knows what she's doing on Instagram. Which is phenomenal. So please do give her a follow, give her a like, and please join us on Buy Some Tickets. I will please hold on, and thank you very much for your time. Just give me 1 second. We'll give a little chat afterwards.
Yeah, you're fine.